Dr. Sebastian Gorka is with me, Fox News contributor and author of the forthcoming book, Why We Fight, Recovering America's Will to Win. Dr. G, a few topics I would like to get to with you to start the day. But first off, let's talk about some of the big news that's happening overnight and it really happening right now. And I joke on the show sometimes about how the show starts 6 Eastern, midnight Hawaii. And big news is coming out of Hawaii this morning where Korean war dead remains are being returned to the United States. And there's so many questions I have about this. But first of all, let's talk about the policy. This is a big win for President Trump, and I think it's a reflection of some stuff that he's accomplished with trying to put pressure on North Korea. But could you give us some of the details behind this?
Yes, so it's the remains, they have to be confirmed by DNA analysis with relatives, but it's the remains of 55 missing U.S. servicemen missing in action, being brought back to the United States. They left North Korea, actually on the 65th anniversary, very poignantly, of the armistice that didn't formally close the North Korean War, but created the ceasefire. And just for all the listeners who are out there, I see that it has created some consternation. These caskets returned with the United Nations flag on them. That is actually appropriate because the U.S. action in North Korea was done under a United Nations mandate. So that's actually historically accurate. But yes, it is. It's a real coup. This is, we've never seen so many remains returned at one time, and it's a real signal that we are seeing behavior modification in the North Korean regime. The joint statement that was signed in Singapore, that will take a long time to implement fully in terms of denuclearization, but the return of these remains, and then subsequent to Singapore, the cancellation of the North Korean annual anti-American parade. These are very significant signals that there is serious behavior modification occurring in Pyongyang.
Yeah, it's a good sign. And I want to ask also about what America does for our war dead and for their families, the fact that it is so important for us to return their remains, to be able to celebrate them. From afar, I admire this about our country. I think it's a great thing, not just strategically, but morally, for us to do this. I've read at least one book on the topic, specifically a book called Vanished, which is about the huge efforts that are done to return war remains from the Far East, in particular the Philippines, etc. And just honoring the bravest among us as much as humanly possible just seems to be the proverbial 360 win. Honors the family. I think it is probably a big morale booster. And the list goes on and on. But could you describe to us some of the significance of this, Dr. G?
Yes, the Pentagon, you're absolutely right, Alex, invests a significant amount of money and personnel into the issue of the MIA question and bringing home the remains of our servicemen and women. And this is something they've been doing for decades. It's work that is done very quietly. In fact, a former student of mine worked in the main office on MIA issues for many, many years. It's the right thing to do. And I think, if we want to be topical about it, it's important to understand that this isn't just an accident. We do this, of course, always. But this is something that's very important to the president. I can tell you from the first time, I think it was the fourth week of the administration, when I managed to get 18 soon-to-be Green Berets into the Oval Office to meet with the president, to every time he stops, you'd get off Air Force One and he'd get off the plane, and before he got into the convoy, he'd stop to take time to meet with and talk to all of the police officers that were there to escort his convoy and the beast to wherever we were going. This is a man who understands the sacrifices made by those who wear a uniform, whether it's our servicemen and women, whether it's our peace officers that protect us here in the United States. And it's a great change. And I'll give you one quote to indicate how important this is and how these things can change with just an election. So I was meeting with these Green Berets. We're giving them a lecture at the National Security Council. I managed to get them into the Oval Office to meet with the president. It was an amazing story. I think Christina Wong eventually wrote it out for Breitbart. He spent time with them. He took photographs with them. And as we left afterwards, it was an amazing meeting. And as we left the West Wing, they had one of the cadre from Fort Bragg, one of the instructors, come up to me. A guy who's been working at Fort Bragg for 50 years, an amazing guy. And he said to me, "That was incredible. I need you to know, for the last 8 years, we weren't even allowed into the building by the last administration." These things matter, Alex. When the men and women who stand on the wall, who protect our republic, know that the president has his back, when they know that they are signaled by the seriousness with which he takes the question of our servicemen missing in North Korea, that changes everything. That level of morale boost cannot be measured in terms of money, and that's just how big a difference one election can make in America.
All right, so Dr. Sebastian Gorka is my guest. He is Fox News contributor, author of Why We Fight, and the former advisor to the president and former national security editor for Breitbart News. Okay, so the president said he's going to meet with, he is willing to meet with the Iranian regime without preconditions. This is a big departure from any other foreign policy from any other establishment politician. I think a lot of it is just provocative words from the president. But is there anything to this as a strategy, at least him announcing that he's willing to do this? I don't know if there's a huge practical effect, Dr. G, but I want to get your thoughts on it because you're the expert.
It's not just a stunt. So the president is very good at using social media, at triggering people who need to be triggered. But the president, at the end of the day, he isn't just a patriot. He's a pragmatist. And he really calls everybody's bluff, whether it's with regards to tariffs, whether it's regards to NATO freeloaders not paying their fair share, or whether it's Iran. And yes, it would be a gross departure. But it also, when you see the reaction from Iran, it achieves exactly the purpose it needs to achieve. So if you don't close a window to potential negotiations, remember, every president through history has met with his rivals, whether it's John F. Kennedy in Vienna in 1961 or 1962. He sat down with Khrushchev at the height of the Cold War when we had nuclear missiles arrayed against each other, whether it was Reagan in Reykjavik with Gorbachev. This is an individual who's prepared to sit down if there is a possibility from some kind of discussion. But again, it's very, very different from sending pallets of cash to Iran. So that's the big difference.
It is a big difference. So we spent a little time talking about this in the first hour with John Hayward, but it's worth revisiting it. I'm seeing some patterns here where you've got Iran's economy in free fall. Even Rouhani might end up being held to account for this, which is a big deal in a place it's sort of a semi-dictatorship to have the key leaders, the premiers, get held accountable for a bad economy. It actually shows you just how bad things must be. But in the meantime, they're doing a lot of bravado and bravura in the Straits of Hormuz. A lot of Navy of flexing of power and might, not to mention the Twitter rebukes of President Trump. Could you connect some of these together? I feel like there have to be some connective tissue to all this. It can't all be coincidental, Dr. G.
Yeah, but there's very, very few things that are coincidental. It may not be mappable by the tools of the foreign policy, quote unquote, elite that got us into the mess we've got into in the last 20 years. But, as we've discussed before, the president has an almost preternatural instinctual capacity. He knows how to read his interlocutors. He knows how to call their bluff, whether it's Kim or whether it's anybody else. And he understands, especially now that John Bolton's in the position that he's in at the National Security Council, the threat that Iran poses. And very much, being a businessman, what you mentioned is crucial. He understands the economic situation, the dire economic situation that Iran is in. this is crucially important because we had in 2009 the Green Revolution that was totally snubbed by the Obama administration. And now we have something that's much, much more significant. Back in 2009, the protests occurring were almost exclusively centralized around Tehran. Remember the dreadful footage of that young woman being gunned down by the Iranian security forces and bleeding out on the pavement. Today, the protests are everywhere. They're all over Iran. And in the last 9 years, the stability of the regime has been significantly undermined by what is deemed by many Iranians as the Tehran, the mullahs' adventurism across the region. So they spent a lot of money, whether it's backing their rebels in Yemen, whether it's having their military and the Quds Force run around Iraq. So Iran has done lots of things that have actually heightened the dissatisfaction of the average Iranian. So this government, this administration, this president has no interest in regime change, meaning us going in to change the system, but the potentiality for Iranians changing their own regime has significantly increased in the last 8 years.
All right. So, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, once again, I want to ask you about a very interesting story that has not gotten a ton of play. And again, I want to do some dot connecting with you, which is something that we have the chance to do on radio, which you don't really get as much of a chance to do on TV, which is that Google is working with China, according to reports, to create a search engine that has heightened filtration so that the Chinese government, which does not have anything remotely close to freedom of speech or press, of course, oppresses its people, uses this as a way to oppress its people. They have huge blockouts of massive swaths of content throughout the internet. And Google is going to be working with them, according to reports, to come up with a search engine that will be approved by the Chinese Communist regime. In the meantime, there's a story a couple of months ago, due to too many employees being triggered, Google was not going to offer their AI tech up to the Pentagon for another contract. They previously had a contract. They're going to let that run out. They're not going to do a new one. And also, a United States general said earlier this week that they're very concerned that we are getting our butts kicked in the race to build the best AI with China. So 3 stories. I think they're clearly related here. And again, Dr. G, I think the proliferation of AI is very likely to cause a lot more harm than good, but we cannot afford to fall behind the Chinese in this regard. And in the meantime, Google not working with the Pentagon, but they will work with the red Chinese government. And I am just, I feel like no one will make this connection aside from maybe us. So let's make it.
Yeah, this is a really big story, and I'm so glad you're covering it. There is a trend here. There's a pattern, and it's not just about AI. It's what you guys call the masters of the universe, right? So yeah. Go back to the San Bernardino killing, the jihadi massacre of 13 people at a Christmas party by a husband and wife jihadi team. Do you remember? Let's just remind the listeners. Afterwards, one of the phones that belonged to the government of San Bernardino, where one of the attackers worked, was found. And what did Apple do when the FBI requested to unlock it? They refused. So think about that. You're siding with the bad guys, with the mass murderers, for some kind of corporate interest. There's a parallel here to Google, and it's not just this contract or that contract. Google announced less than a year ago the opening of the world's biggest artificial intelligence research facility. Now, if we were in any other age, where would we expect that to be launched? Maybe in Boston, maybe in Palo Alto, maybe we'd build it, somewhere in the United States, right? No, they're building it in Beijing. And this is, in my time in the White House taught me one thing. I went in there to do counterterrorism, specifically, ISIS issues and Al-Qaeda. But I learned once you get the clearances, once you read the reports, The number one strategic threat we face is not global jihadism. It isn't even Iran. It's not Russia. The number one strategic threat we face is China. And it's bad enough that we have, the Kissingers of the world, the rest of the policy elite, facilitate the rise of China with most favored nation status, with World Trade Organization membership. But when you get Silicon Valley, when you get the masters of the universe, actually facilitate the rise of our adversary, which has declared itself to wish it has its own plan. It's called One Belt, One Road. The Communist Party of China has said explicitly they will replace America as the force in the world by the 100th anniversary of their revolution in 2049. And you get companies like Google, like Apple, like others, not just having to fend off Chinese espionage, but actually facilitating the Chinese acquisition of intellectual property. Because once you move that facility to China, just because you want access to markets so you can report, to your shareholders at the next meeting how many more customers you have, it's not just theft, it's direct acquisition. Every line of code that is being written in that research facility, in that manufacturing facility, is going straight into the belly of the Chinese beast. So this is a massive, massive story. And yeah, it's not being covered, but at least Breitbart News is looking at it, and it is something that I dearly hope you will continue to investigate.
Thank you, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. So pick up the book, Why We Fight, check out his Fox News segments, and anything else today that's on your mind that you got to get off your chest, Dr. G.
I'm if we get out of the national security arena, I'm just stunned that the Democrats really have no platform, no candidate, and no message. It's as if they truly haven't learned anything by what Mike Flynn called the peaceful political revolution that was November the 8th, 2016. So how they've been taken over by the radicals is just a testament to Andrew's book. So if the listeners haven't read it, one of the most significant books I ever read was Righteous Indignation by Andrew Breitbart, and he predicted most of what we're seeing today. It's really, really, really quite stunning.
Yeah, can't recommend it enough, and I plugged it once on the show today, and there's no reason not to plug it again, and I'm glad you did that. Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Pick up the book, Why We Fight, available for pre-order now, and always appreciate his contribution. Talk to you next week, same time, same place, sir.
I love it. Look forward to it. God bless you and the listeners.